Imagine booking an Airbnb and you show up, it's night, let's say 10 o'clock at night, you're exhausted from your day, you're traveling, and you show up at your Airbnb and there's somebody already checked in to your Airbnb. What would you do?
You are listening to the Cabin of Horrors podcast. Go behind the scenes of all your favorite horror movies from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and now. I am your host, the incredible Josh.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Cabin of Horrors podcast. Can you believe that we are almost done season 2? We're almost done the second season, which is technically the third season because we had a season 0. Which I count as season 0 because the episodes, in my opinion, weren't the best. But I was just starting out, right? I was figuring out the podcasting world. And now we're almost done season 2. Season 2 will wrap up with episode 13. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who's listening to the podcast because I really appreciate it. And I love when you all reach out to me, tell me what you think of the episodes, even ask me for opinions on horror movies. I love it. Thank you so freaking much. And I can't wait to keep giving you more and more horror content to come in the coming years and months and weeks. Nightmare on the 13th is launching April 13th over on Twitch, twitch.tv/Cabin of Horrors. So make sure you're following over on Twitch so that when Nightmare on the 13th drops, you'll be one of the first people to actually be able to experience this. I'm pumped for that project. For today's episode, we are talking about a film that came out last year and was another divisive horror movie. People either loved it or they hated it. And that movie is Barbarian. It was written and directed by Zach Cregger, and it was his screenwriting and directorial debut. The film stars Bill Skarsgård, Justin Long, and Georgina Campbell. And it follows a woman who finds out that the rental home she reserved, so the Airbnb, was accidentally double booked by a man. Now, I'll give you guys a heads up on what my thoughts are of the movie, because that way if you don't want to listen to this episode, I'll give you an out. I am on the side that this movie was terrible. I hated this movie. I'm sorry. I know I've taken the side of movies being good in the divisive series lately, like, Skinamarink and all that. But Barbarian was so bad. I didn't like it. I'm sorry, guys. I didn't like Barbarian at all. I watched the whole thing. I don't know how I sat through it. But man, I am on the side of that this movie didn't need to be made. But anyways, we're going to talk about it, and I'll share a lot more of my thoughts as we're going through the movie. So Zach Cregger was initially inspired by the non-fiction book The Gift of Fear. He cited a section that encouraged women to trust their intuition and not ignore the subconscious red flags that arise in their day-to-day. He sat down to write a single 30-page scene that would incorporate as many of these red flags as possible, which he definitely, I feel, did at the beginning. I was watching Barbarian with my girlfriend, and she said the same thing at the beginning of the movie. She's like, there's so many red flags here, girl. Why are you going in there? There's so many red flags here. So when writing the scene, Cregger settled on a woman showing up to an Airbnb late at night, only to find that it had been double booked. He stuck to the rule that if he was surprising himself with his writing, then he has to be surprising his audience. And he became frustrated during the writing process. He feared the direction of the story was too predictable. So with no forethought, he decided to introduce a twist that would flip the script on its head. Early in pre-production of Barbarian, Cregger reportedly reached out to multiple financiers, distributors, including A24, but he was rejected. Then it was agreed that the film would be produced through Boulder Light Pictures, and then later on joined by Vertigo Entertainment. And originally, Zac Efron was the first choice to play AJ in Barbarian, whom Cregger had envisioned as a beefcake kind of bimbo. However, when Efron turned down the role, Cregger decided to take the character's image in a different direction, and he cast Justin Long. Of course he cast Justin Long. I swear, Justin Long has the worst luck in horror movies. If you see Justin Long in a horror movie, you know he is not going to have a good time. You just know. Principal photography of Barbarian began in early 2021 in Bulgaria, and the film was shot in Sofia, while exterior neighborhood shots were filmed in the Brightmoor neighborhood of Detroit. Originally, Barbarian was scheduled to be theatrically released in the United States by 20th Century Studios on August 12, 2022. However, it was then rescheduled to be released on August 31st, and then again rescheduled to be released on September 9th. And it was in April of 2021 that the founder and the main financier of the film, Eric Tavetin, had died of cancer. So they were really unsure of the future of the film, so Lee secured financial backing from New Regency, who increased the film's budget to $4.5 million. And as a result of this, 20th Century Studios became the film's distributor, also had a deal with Walt Disney Studios. And Disney reportedly maintained a theatrical release for Barbarian instead of just putting it for streaming on Hulu, because there was a strong positive reception from test screenings. So Cinema Blend and AMC Theaters premiered the film at the 2022 San Diego Comic-Con on July 22nd, and it garnered some pretty positive reactions. It was then also screened at the Arrow Video Fright Fest on August 29th, and then released on October 20th, 2022 in Australia, October 27th in New Zealand, and October 28th in the United Kingdom. In the United States, Barbarian was released on digital download and to stream on HBO Max beginning October 25th. And it was also released on Star Plus and Disney Plus as part of the Star Content Hub on October 26, 2022. Which I found to be super weird. Like, that's how I watched Barbarian. I watched Barbarian through Disney Plus, and the fact that I was able to watch that movie through Disney Plus was just so weird to me. Like, that Disney was airing these kind of movies on its streaming platform. I was shocked. I was surprised by the end of it. I'm like, did I seriously just watch this movie on Disney Plus? Like, seriously? This wasn't on Prime or fucking Netflix? Like, what? Disney? And what really got me about this film is that I didn't know much about it going into it. And they did a really good job with the marketing on that, because they released the first trailer for Barbarian on June 23rd, 2022, and it was in front of theatrical showings for Black Phone. But Disney marketed the film to feel like a discovery, so they teased very little of the film's plot when they released it. And I wasn't going to go on the side of whether it was a good movie or a bad movie based on people's opinions, only because it was so divided. And usually in that case, you know, when a movie in the horror community is that divided, you could as a person like it or hate it. But usually if a movie is so far left that everyone hates it, like, you know, Jeepers Creepers Reborn, you know it's going to be bad going into it. I watched Jeepers Creepers Reborn. I'm not even going to touch that. You're not going to hear about it on the podcast. There's no reason to talk about it. We all know it was shit. It's common consensus. Jeepers Creepers Reborn was garbage. Just garbage. So I won't be talking about that. But this movie, you know, the divisive ones like this, Skinamarink, you may like it. So I gave it a chance. At the end of the day, I really didn't like it. Barbarian went on to gross $40.9 million in the United States and Canada, and then $4.5 million in other territories. So it made a worldwide gross of $45.4 million with a budget of $4.5 million. So it made a lot of money, right? There's no doubt there it made over 10 times its budget. So it made bank and made good money. Are we going to see a franchise of this? Probably. Fuck. But I hope not. I really hope this doesn't spawn into a franchise, but based on the amount of money it made, who knows? So without further ado, let's dive in and talk about the plot of Barbarian. The film starts off by introducing us to Tess Marshall. She arrives at a rental house in the rundown Detroit neighborhood of Brightmoor, and it's also on the evening before she has a job interview. Now when she gets there, she finds out that the Air BnB has been double booked, and it's already occupied by a man named Keith Toshko. She's initially unnerved by Keith, but warms up to him and decides that she'll stay the night while Keith sleeps on the sofa. She wakes up in the middle of the night, and she's shaken to find that her bedroom door has been opened. But Keith is sound asleep, and when she wakes him up to ask him what the fuck's going on, he assures her that he didn't touch the door. So tons of red flags already, right at the beginning. Would you stay in this Airbnb if you were experiencing this? Like, that's the big thing for me. Like, I know with horror movies, there's that trope, right? Like, get out of the house, get out of the house, you know. I get that trope, but at the same time, don't make it so that it's insulting the audience's intelligence. You know what I mean? Like, there's a fine line between horror tropes and insulting audience intelligence. With the way society is right now, well, the way society is just in general, if you were in a real life situation as a woman in this place, would you leave? Like, I feel like you would, and I feel like you should in this case. Like, you don't feel safe. So why would you stay? Anyways, that's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. I'm not trying to start fights. Just my opinion. So she goes back to sleep, and the next morning wakes up and goes for her job interview. However, she's warned by people in the community not to stay in the area near the house. But despite that, she returns to the house. And when she does, she's chased inside of it by a homeless man who's yelling at her to leave. So then she decides that she's going to explore a little bit more of this house that she's staying in. And she ends up getting herself locked in the basement and stumbles across a hidden corridor. This corridor leads to a room that holds a camcorder, a stained mattress, and a bloody handprint. And at this point, Keith hasn't been in the house. He wasn't at the house when Tess arrived back. But then when he does return to the house, he finds that Tess has been in the basement and frees her from it, and then goes with her to investigate the hidden corridor. And then decides that he's going to be a big man and investigate the hidden corridor himself. However, he doesn't return. So Tess decides she's got to save him now, and follows him, and then finds a tunnel that's attached to this hidden corridor. Now, in this tunnel, she finds Keith, and he's injured. However, Keith is telling her to leave. Keith's telling her to get out, but it's too late. The pair of them end up getting attacked by a naked, deformed woman who's later credited as the mother in the credits, and kills Keith. We then fast forward 2 weeks later. Yeah, this movie plot is a shit show. So now we fast forward 2 weeks later, and we see the owner of this Air BnB that the two of them were staying in, and he's an actor named AJ Gilbride. He's just been fired from his television series because there's been allegations that he sexually assaulted his co-star. So now he has pressure on him to sell all the assets he has so he can pay his legal costs. One of these assets, of course, is the Air BnB house. So AJ travels to Detroit so he can inspect the house before selling it. We all know where this is probably going, right? I love how he tried to add a twist and stuff because he didn't want people to guess the plot, but despite that, it was fucking obvious. Anyways, AJ finds the same hidden tunnel that the two had found, Tess and Keith, and he tries to measure the tunnel, believing that it could increase the house's value. And while he's measuring this tunnel, he gets attacked by the mother and ends up falling into a hole where he meets Tess. We then see a flashback. We see a flashback to the 1980s, which shows Frank, who was the original owner of the house, abducting women, raping them, and keeping them captive within the tunnels. Then we move back to the present. Are you guys confused yet? Is this plot too convoluted for you? Are you confused yet? I hear you, and I'm sorry. Back to the present, we see the mother has locked Tess and AJ in that same hole. Tess tells AJ that the mother wants them to act as her children. And this is fucked up. Like, this scene didn't need to happen. This scene was probably the most fucked up scene in the movie. But it happened. So AJ gets dragged away by the mother, who forcibly breastfeeds him. Yes. Just as, envision it. It was there. They showed it in the movie. It was unnecessary. Tess then uses this opportunity to escape the house with the help of Andre, who was the homeless man from earlier that was chasing her into the house, telling her to leave. He warns her that the mother will come after her at nightfall. And now the mother's been distracted by Tess's escape, so AJ ends up finding a room which the mother for some reason refuses to approach. Inside of it, he finds Frank, who's completely bedridden. Assuming that he's just another victim for the mother, AJ assures Frank that he's going to call the police, but then finds evidence of Frank's crimes. Frank then ends up killing himself with a concealed revolver, making his entry completely pointless. So Tess leads the police to the house, but they completely dismiss her story, and they leave as night begins to fall. Tess then breaks back into the house. She breaks back into the house instead of just leaving, running away, breaks back into the house to retrieve her car keys, and then rams the mother with her car, which seemingly kills her. So she returns to the basement so she can try to rescue AJ, who accidentally shoots her with Frank's gun. Like, seriously, you can't make this shit up. So the two of them end up escaping, and they also find that the mother has vanished. So Tess and AJ then take shelter with the homeless guy, Andre. Andre explains that the mother is a product of Frank's multi-generational incest with his victims. The mother bursts in out of nowhere during this, kills Andre, and then chases Tess and AJ up a water tower. AJ ends up losing his gun and pushes Tess off the water tower to save himself. The mother jumps after her and shields her from the fall. Then when AJ finds out that Tess is still alive, he tries to rationalize his actions to Tess, only for the mother to revive and kill him. The mother then attempts to comfort Tess, but she shoots the mother dead with Frank's gun and limps away as the sun rises. That is the film Barbarian. Do you see what I mean? I honestly, sometimes, especially with divisive films, I can understand both sides. I can understand why someone liked it. I can understand why someone didn't like it. Especially with, Skinamarink. I know it's not for everybody. I freaking love it, but I know a lot of people absolutely hate it and found it to be the most boring film of all time. But Barbarian? I don't understand. If you are a fan of Barbarian, please let me know. Send me a message. Drop a comment on a post. I need to know what you liked about Barbarian, because I'm seriously having issues wrapping my head around this film and why people liked it as much as they did. I saw comments of people saying this was a masterclass in horror. This was a movie that defies generations. This movie was so good. Why? What made this movie so good? Was it because the execution was unique? Because it was, I'll give it that. The execution of the film and the plot, in a way, was kind of unique, but unique in a way that, nobody, why do you give a shit? What, how is this? I didn't like it. And as I always say, right, everyone's entitled to their opinion. You are allowed to love a movie and I hate it and vice versa. I will never harp on somebody for liking something that I hate. I just don't understand why people like this movie. So if you can help me, that would be great. Let me know what you liked about Barbarian, if you liked Barbarian, because I need to understand that. So that wraps us up for our Barbarian review of this podcast. Now we're heading into our 80s Decade in Review series. We're now in the year 1986. And we're going to review a movie that I absolutely love. I love this movie. It is one of my favorite 80s B-horror movies ever, and could actually see a remake, because I've seen that James Wan actually wants to remake this movie, so it could happen. And that movie is Chopping Mall. It was co-written and directed by Jim Wynorski and produced by Julie Corman, starring Kelly Maroney, Tony O'Dell, a whole bunch of B-name actors and actresses, to be honest with you. But it was a great film. This movie was so much fun. One of my favorite B-80s movies, along with Death Spa. This movie is awesome. I love it. Film scholars have analyzed this movie. For example, Craig Ian Mann compared the film favorably to George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead from 1978, which was also set in a shopping mall, which he described as an anti-capitalist parable for the Jimmy Carter years, which suggests that Chopping Mall functions in a very similar way as a comment on consumption during the Reagan era. Mann suggests that the robots in the film, even when malfunctioning, serve as mechanical enforcers of workplace discipline and capitalist interests. So the producer of the film, Julie Corman, had a deal with Vestron to make a horror film that took place in a mall. Jim Wynorski agreed to write a cheap screenplay on the condition that he could also direct. So he wrote the script with Steve Mitchell, whom he had known since the 70s. They had met at conventions, became good friends. They decided to do a Phantom of the Mall type movie. And Mitchell says it was Wynorski's idea to feature robots. This was because Wynorski was inspired by the 1954 film Gog. He claims he never saw the 1973 TV film Trapped, which many believe actually is what inspired Chopping Mall. Mitchell says they wrote up the story in about 24 hours and sent it to Julie Corman. Vestron gave their approval within a week despite the lack of a script, and the script took around 4 to 5 weeks in total to write. Chopping Mall was intended to be shot on location at the Beverly Center, but the production was unable to afford their fee. So instead, the majority of filming took place in the Sherman Oaks Galleria, same place where Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Commando had been shot. Though they did use the Beverly Center for exterior shots instead. And Mitchell estimates that filming took a total of about 20 days at the Galleria and then another 2 days at Corman Studios. Concord Pictures then gave the film a regional test market release under the title Killbots on March 21st, 1986. However, it fared pretty poorly with test audiences, so the film was truncated and then retitled Chopping Mall, which was then theatrically released in Pittsburgh on September 5th, 1986, and then in New York City on November 14th, 1986. And there is an alternate version of Chopping Mall as well. At least 2 different versions of the film exist. The TV cut of the film has some extra footage, such as a small homage to Attack of the Crab Monsters. There's also extended scenes of Ferdy and Allison watching TV, some aerial shots, and an extension of one of the Ferdy-Allison scenes, but there isn't an actual official source which offers this version. Now, the budget for the film was estimated to be about $800,000, and I have tried, guys, to find the box office numbers for Chopping Mall. I can't. There's like no information on what Chopping Mall made at the box office. I kid you not. I even went to my financials registry where I usually get all of my details for horror movies, and they usually have all the box office numbers from movies from the 70s. But there is nothing on Chopping Mall. I don't know why. I can't find out how much this movie made. I know it was a budget of $800,000. How much it made at the box office? No idea. Which is so weird. But it was released as well on VHS in the United States by Vestron in 1987. Lionsgate then released the film twice on DVD, once in 2004 and then again in 2012 as part of an 8 horror film DVD set. That's how you know this movie's B. It was part of those 8 horror movie sets that probably just on the box say 80s horror. you know the ones I'm talking about. Now, Wynorski has been quoted as saying that the film did okay when it was released in theaters. It got some okay reviews and it did decent business, but it really found a life on VHS and cable. That's when it was really embraced. Because to be honest with you guys, I didn't know about Chopping Mall until streaming came around. I hadn't heard about Chopping Mall until I think it was on Shudder. I think it was on Shudder when I saw it like years ago. I don't know if it's still on Shudder or not, but when I first saw it, I saw it on Shudder because I was looking for something campy, something 80s, something B that I could just watch and laugh and enjoy and just, you know what I mean. You know that feeling you get that only 80s horror can quench. That's where I saw it. I saw it on Shudder. So I don't know if it's still there. Go feel free to check if you want to check out Chopping Mall because it's a great movie. See if it's on Shudder. Shudder's the home of horror, I'm telling you. I love Shudder. But anyways, let's dive into the plot of Chopping Mall. The film starts off at Park Plaza Mall, and they've just installed a state-of-the-art security system, which includes shutters across all the exits and 3 high-tech robots programmed to disable and apprehend thieves using tasers and tranquilizer guns. Which already, you just need to hear that one sentence and understand that this movie's going to be campy. And they embrace the camp. This is one of those movies, they embrace it. They went with it and they executed it great. So we meet Allison and Susie. They're co-workers at a pizzeria in the mall. They join their respective boyfriends, Greg and Ferdy, along with their other friends, Rick and Linda and Mike and Leslie. They're going to join them for an after-hours party in a furniture store where Mike, Greg, and Ferdy all work. Once the mall closes for the night, the couples begin to have sex, drink, party, everything you can imagine inside the furniture store. However, outside the mall, a lightning storm is occurring, and the lightning strike hits the mall several times and damages the computer controlling protectors 1, 2, and 3, which, of course, they then malfunction and kill the technicians and a janitor before starting their routine patrol. Mike then goes out to make a purchase for some cigarettes for Leslie at a vending machine when Protector 1 attacks him and slashes his throat. Leslie goes to find him, and she ends up getting chased by Protector 1, which beams a laser at her, causing her head to explode. Yes, this is real. Yes, you should watch this movie. It's great. It's so much fun. So the others witness Leslie's murder, and they end up barricading themselves in a stockroom. They ain't gonna have nothing to fucking do with this. The women of the group attempt to escape through an air vent, but Susie panics, and they exit the vent system into an automotive shop. They end up arming themselves with gasoline and flares. They're going to take on this deadly stream of robots. Just talking about this makes me very excited for Five Nights at Freddy's. I don't know about you guys. Is anybody else excited for Five Nights at Freddy's? I'm sorry to detour a little bit, squirrel brain, but Five Nights at Freddy's, I don't know if anyone's heard, it is coming out. It's being filmed right now by Blumhouse, which, oh my god, and Matthew Lilliard's going to be playing William Afton. So I don't know if you're a Five Nights at Freddy's fan, but talking about killer robots right now in Chopping Mall, it's just making me want the FNAF movie even quicker. That movie I am so excited for. I cannot wait for Five Nights at Freddy's. But anyways, back to Chopping Mall. So while the women have armed themselves with gasoline and flares, the men break into a sporting goods store to arm themselves with firearms. The two groups reunite, and they end up using a propane tank, which seemingly destroys Protector 1. The men then set up the elevator as a booby trap, but the killbots ambush the women and ignite Susie by shooting her gasoline can and burning her alive. Greg unsuccessfully shoots them before Rick drags him away. So the teenagers regroup and they rig the elevator to trap on Protector 2, which effectively destroys it. Then they hide in the restaurant where Allison works. Inside the restaurant, Greg confronts Allison and Linda about leaving the air ducts and shows rage because of Susie's death. He pulls his gun on Ferdy when he intercedes on Allison and Linda's behalf. Rick tries to calm him down, and Ferdy suggests just destroying the Killbots' main control center in hopes of shutting them down completely. The group agrees this is probably the best option, and they should have thought about it sooner, and they head to the control center on the 3rd floor. However, the robot ends up throwing Greg over the railing, and he falls to his death. They start running, and we got 4 remaining survivors, Allison, Ferdy, Rick, and Linda. They also find that the first robot recovered from its earlier defeat, so Protector 1 is back! So they take refuge inside a department store and set up mannequins to confuse Protector 1 and Protector 3. Their plan works, as they both started firing at the dummies and one of them blinds itself with its own reflector laser. However, the blind Protector 3 kills Linda, and an enraged Rick rams a golf cart into it. A bolt of electricity ends up killing him, but his attempt to successfully destroy the robot went through without a hitch. Well, I guess there was a hitch, he died, but anyway. Wow. So Protector 1 is marked as the final robot, and it's cornering Allison. Ferdy rescues her and shoots it point blank, damaging its laser just before he falls unconscious. Allison has an injured leg now, but she escapes into Ellis Paint Company and sets up a trap by mixing paint and chemicals. She then lures Protector 1 inside, where it gets stuck for failing to find traction on the spilled paint. She tosses a flare into the store, which ignites the chemicals and finally destroys Protector 1. Daylight then shines into the mall. Allison leaves the store as Ferdy awakens, the two being the only remaining survivors. And then we see in a post-credits scene that there is a 4th Protector who says its catchphrase, "Have a nice day, one last time." And that's Chopping Mall. That is the ending of Chopping Mall in all of its glory. And I say glory very, very importantly, because this movie is great. It's just a lot of fun. You don't go into this movie expecting it to be this amazing horror that's going to scare the shit out of you and is an ultimate classic. It is a classic, but in a way that it's a B movie. You're meant to watch it and have fun with it and just enjoy it for its ridiculousness. Because trust me, this film is ridiculous. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. That's going to wrap us up for this episode. If you're not already, please follow me on Instagram, instagram.com/Cabin of Horrors podcast. You can stay up to date with all the latest news and updates coming from Cabin. A lot of stuff is going to be coming out this year. I'm just warning you guys right now. There is a lot of stuff right now in the wheelhouse that has already started, that is going to be rolling out over the next 6 months. There is going to be a lot of awesome shit coming from Cabin of Horrors this year, and I cannot begin to tell you guys how excited I am. And not even just movie reviews and podcasts. There's going to be so much more. I can't talk about it right now for legal reasons, to be honest with you, but once I get the go-ahead, I'm going to announce it, and I can't freaking wait. So stay tuned. Make sure you're following me on Instagram so you can stay in the know. And I'll be back again next week with a brand new episode. And I'm thinking I may drop a hint, because I'm not 1,000% sure on what I'm going to review, but I think I might review Hellraiser. The Hellraiser remake. I'll either review that here or I'm going to review it on the Patreon, but either way, I am going to be reviewing that movie. And speaking of Patreon, if you haven't yet, head on over to our Patreon. Currently, we have one episode up. It's the episode on the Evil Dead reboot, and we're going to have more episodes coming. But if you'd like to support the podcast, feel free to do so. Starts at $3. I would certainly appreciate any support you're willing to give, anything you're comfortable